In 480 BCE, the Persian Empire, led by King Xerxes, began its invasion of Greece. His army, vast, unstoppable, numbered over 100,000 soldiers stretching across the horizon. Greece was divided, its city-states often at odds, but Sparta stood apart, famed for discipline, training, and unyielding courage. Maps tell the story, but the men would become legend. Leonidas, son of Anaxandridas II, had trained his entire life for war. By 480 BCE, he was king and commander of Sparta's elite warriors. At the time, Sparta was a society unlike any other. From a young age, boys were trained in the agoge, a brutal system designed to forge soldiers from children. Hunger, pain, and relentless drills hardened them. Every day was a test of endurance, strength, and loyalty to the state. These were not ordinary men. They were Spartans. A coalition of Greek city-states gathered at Thermopylae, 7,000 men in total, among them 300 Spartans, chosen to face the Persian horde. The narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae would be their stage and their crucible. Thermopylae, the hot gates, a narrow strip of land wedged between mountains and sea. Here, a small force could hold back the might of an empire. The Greeks positioned themselves with precision, using the terrain to neutralize Persia's numbers. The Persians arrived. Xerxes demanded surrender. Leonidas refused. Xerxes's messengers rode forth under banners of gold and silk, their voices echoing through the narrow pass. They promised mercy if the Greeks would lay down their weapons. But Leonidas, unshaken, gave a single reply, "Molon labe, come and take them." That defiance became the heartbeat of the battlefield. For 2 full days, the Persians hurled themselves against the wall of shields. The sound of metal striking bronze filled the air like thunder. Each time a Persian spear found a target, a Spartan blade answered twice over. The ground ran slick with dust and blood, yet the line never broke. The Immortals, Xerxes' elite guard, advanced next, their armor gleaming black in the sunlight. They had never known defeat, never met an enemy who could hold against their might. But in that narrow pass their numbers meant nothing. Shoulder to shoulder, the Spartans forced them back, their discipline unmatched. The Immortals fell as mortals do. The sea wind carried the stench of death, and the cries of the wounded mixed with the clash of bronze and iron. Still, the Spartans fought with calm precision, their movements trained, their minds clear. Each man was both soldier and shield, protecting the brother beside him. To falter was unthinkable. To retreat, impossible. Behind them, the Thespians and other Greeks watched in awe. These men, few in number, were holding back the most powerful empire on earth. Every fallen Persian bought time for Greece to unite, to prepare, to believe. By nightfall, fires burned along the cliffs, and the air shimmered with smoke. The Spartans cleaned their weapons in silence, standing amid heaps of the fallen. Leonidas walked the line, speaking few words, but his presence was enough. Every man who met his gaze knew they were fighting for something eternal. Xerxes could not believe what he saw. He ordered his men forward again, furious that mortals dared to resist him. Waves of archers released volleys that darkened the sky, yet the Spartans lifted their shields and stood firm. The arrows fell like rain, but when the storm passed, the line remained. The Persians had not advanced a single step. For the Greeks, this was no mere defense. It was a statement. In that narrow corridor of land, they declared that freedom could not be conquered by fear. Each heartbeat, each clash of steel was an act of defiance written in blood. The second day dawned with the same violence. Persian cavalry tried to break the Greek formation, but the terrain betrayed them. The narrow pass denied them speed and space. Horses stumbled on rocks, and their riders were cut down by disciplined rows of spears. The more the Persians attacked, the stronger the legend grew. tales spread through the camps of men who fought like gods, 300 Spartans who stood against the endless tide. Soldiers whispered that no mortal could match their courage, and even among the Persians fear began to take root. As the sun set on the second day, the battlefield was unrecognizable, covered in broken shields, fallen soldiers, and shattered armor. The Greeks had lost many, but the Persians had lost thousands. Xerxes' confidence wavered. His endless army had met an unbreakable wall. That night, Leonidas gathered his men. They knew the fight could not continue forever, yet none spoke of surrender. The Spartans would fight until their last breath, not because they expected victory, but because honor demanded nothing less. In the flickering firelight, they sharpened their spears and prepared for dawn, their final dawn. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers charged into the pass. Arrows darkened the sky, spears shattered against shields. Yet the Spartans held, unbroken, unyielding, a wall of courage against impossible odds. Every shield locked, every spear ready, every heartbeat a roar of defiance. But the Greeks were betrayed. Ephialtes, a traitor, revealed a hidden mountain path. Xerxes sent troops to flank the defenders. Leonidas knew the end was near. He sent most of the allied troops home, remaining behind with 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans who refused to leave. They would make their final stand. Dawn broke over Thermopylae. The air was heavy, silent, the kind of silence that only comes before death. The Spartans stood in formation, bronze armor reflecting the rising sun like fire. They knew this day would be their last, but not one man wavered. Leonidas moved down the line, his face calm, his voice low. He spoke not of fear, but of duty, of glory, of home, of Sparta. "Remember," he said, "that our deeds today will echo through eternity." His men answered not with words, but with a single nod. It was enough. Far in the distance the dust began to rise. The Persians were advancing again. Xerxes had sent his entire force, tens of thousands ready to crush the last defenders. Trumpets blared, the mountains shook beneath the march of men. Yet in that narrow pass 300 Spartans waited, ready to meet history face to face. The first impact came like thunder. Spears splintered, shields cracked, and blood darkened the ground. Still the Spartans fought on, each movement precise, practiced, unstoppable. They fought as one body, one mind, one will, every man a blade in the same strike. As the Persians poured in, the Spartans fell back step by step, forming a ring around their king. Their arms ached, their armor dented, but their hearts burned hotter than ever. The sun climbed higher, the heat unbearable, yet they fought as if the gods themselves watched. Leonidas fought at the front, his spear breaking, his sword flashing with each strike. He moved like a storm through the enemy ranks, his roar carrying over the clash of battle. For every Spartan that fell, a dozen Persians followed. The pass became a sea of chaos, a whirlpool of death and defiance. Then came the arrows, a black cloud blotting out the sun. The Spartans raised their shields, but there were too many. Men fell where they stood, pierced through armor and bone. Still they fought on, until shields were shattered and swords worn to nothing. They fought with bare hands, with broken spears, with the weight of their pride. When Leonidas fell, it was as if time itself paused. His men closed around his body, refusing to let the Persians take it. They held the line until none remained standing. It was not a defeat. It was a promise kept to the end. Even as the last Spartan was cut down, the Persians could not call it victory. They had conquered a pass, but not the spirit of those who died defending it. The courage of 300 men had bought Greece something far greater than land. It had bought them time and hope. The survivors who watched from afar would carry the story home. They would tell of Leonidas and his warriors who stood against the impossible, of the roar that defied an empire, of the day mortals became eternal. The battlefield grew quiet again, littered with the fallen. The sea wind carried away the smoke and the dust, but not the memory. The mountains of Thermopylae would forever whisper their names. For days after the battle, the Persian army marched onward, but their triumph was hollow. They had won the ground, yet lost something far greater. The courage of 300 men had shaken the faith of an empire. Xerxes, who believed himself a god among kings, now knew what mortal defiance looked like. Among the ruins of the battlefield, the dead lay silent. Spartan, Thespian, Theban, and Persian alike. The sea breeze whispered through the armor of the fallen, carrying with it the echo of Leonidas' final stand. Even the Persians, hardened by endless wars, paused in awe of what had transpired there. The body of Leonidas was taken by the Persians, but his spirit remained in the stones and dust of Thermopylae. In time, the Greeks would return for his remains, burying him with honor. At his tomb, they carved a single phrase: "Here lies Leonidas, king of Sparta, who gave his life for freedom." The news of Thermopylae spread like wildfire through Greece. In Athens, Thebes, Corinth, every city heard of the impossible stand. The story traveled by sea and land, told by survivors and merchants, whispered in temples and taverns alike. The death of Leonidas became a rallying cry. No longer was Greece divided by politics or pride. The sacrifice at Thermopylae united them. When Xerxes' forces burned Athens to the ground, the Greeks did not yield. They gathered their fleets and faced the Persians again at Salamis, where, inspired by the Spartans, they struck a decisive blow. Later, at Plataea, the Persian invasion was ended for good. The Greek hoplites stood victorious, their morale unshaken, their unity forged in the fire of Thermopylae. What began as defeat became the seed of triumph. And from that moment onward, the name of Sparta carried a new meaning. It was no longer just a city. It was a symbol of discipline, endurance, and courage beyond reason. Parents told their children of the 300 who stood when all others would have fled. Generals studied their tactics. Poets wrote of their valor. Philosophers saw in them the essence of human freedom. Centuries passed, but the echo never faded. The Romans revered them. Renaissance scholars rediscovered their story. Even in modern times, the cry of Molon Labe still resounds, not as a call to war, but as a reminder that courage, once shown, can outlive empires. The mountains of Thermopylae still stand today, changed by time, yet eternal. Travelers walk the same path where Leonidas and his warriors made their stand. Monuments rise from the ground, not in glory of victory, but in reverence to sacrifice. And there, engraved in stone, are the immortal words of Simonides of Ceos, a message from the past to all who live free today. Go tell the Spartan stranger passing by that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. The story of Thermopylae is not about death, but about what it means to live, to stand when all hope is lost, to fight for something greater than yourself, to leave behind a legacy that no empire can erase. In the years that followed, the memory of Thermopylae inspired all of Greece. The Athenians rebuilt, the Greek city-states unified against the Persians, and eventually victories at Salamis and Plataea turned the tide of the war. Thermopylae was not just a battle. It was a legend of courage that shaped the future of Western civilization. Thermopylae is more than a battle. It is a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable human spirit. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie.